Hello and welcome to the Outcomes Over Hours show. I'm Tina Patterson and I've got a really exciting guest with me today. Her name is Rebecca Mitchell, and Rebecca is a professor at Macquarie Business School in their Health and Wellbeing Research Unit. Rebecca has been published in numerous top-tier journals internationally. She's also worked as a state representative on several Council of Australian Government working groups, particularly in the area of health reform. But why I really wanted Rebecca on the show today is that right now she's partnering with Medibank to implement their 4-day work week, which is something that is really, really aligned with my whole philosophy and system of outcomes over hours. So Rebecca, welcome to the Outcomes Over Hours show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Tina. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, it's very, very topical because it is relatively new what Medibank is piloting around the 4-day work week. Can you share with us exactly what it is and what results you're seeing so far?
It's quite exciting, actually, because it's not just your normal 4-day work week. It's part of a larger human-centric, human-focused project, which is more about what is it like to work in Medibank? What is it like for humans, for employees to work? And how can we make that better based on this assumption that if you are well, if you are healthy, if you are thriving, it's not only better for you, but it's better for the organization. So it's got a broader context that I think is really important. And that's actually what attracted us towards this partnership, because it's something a little bit different. There are a few other aspects that I think are different as well. It's action research. That's a very 1970s term, but I think it still is important to think about it. So rather than just putting in place a pilot and then evaluating it, this is part of an ongoing discussion around how we structure work so that it works for people. So it's 6 months that we're talking about now, but that might be shorter, it might be longer, it might continue. We might have other pilots that look similar, but we know are different. So it's part of learning as you're doing. So what's actually working? And even though it's early days, that approach has been fantastic, because right from the get-go, there were discussions about what are employees getting from this? What are the sticking points? What's making it difficult? And how are different people overcoming those sticking points differently? And once you have that kind of experience and you're really looking at it, it makes it so much easier to learn and say, actually, this seems quite effective, as does this. So let's give people a kind of heads up about the sort of problems they might come in contact with and how they might be able to resolve those. So I just love that about it. It's very much, let's learn and make this the best possible model for Medibank and for the employees of Medibank. I think it's, different in that way.
Wonderful. And you mentioned sticking points, and I know there are quite a few. Can you share the ones that are the top ones that you've been discussing and working through?
We've done this before, and I suppose I'll say it in a more general way rather than focusing on Medibank per se. We've been involved in a lot of what I call just broad change management projects that are around changing the way in which employees work. So whether it be a 4-day week or changes in shift work, for example, those kinds of things. And often there's a lot of work done to get employee buy-in. And when I say that, I mean ensuring that employees understand exactly what's happening. And most of the companies that I've worked with have done that really well. The sticking points are often how the supervisors manage, because a supervisory role is very, very difficult. You're squashed almost, as everybody knows, between employees and, the powers that be.
Yeah.
So you have this burden of making sure you reach targets, but also trying to make the workplace the best workplace for your employees you can. And when you put in place a big change, often those supervisors are faced with the largest jump in terms of how do they sustain a culture that's different? How do they, for example, looking at your work, how do they start to talk about outcomes rather than hours? How do they start to speak in terms of projects rather than days of the week and meetings that you have to have? So that, I think, ironically, in Medibank, that has been sort of on their agenda from the beginning. We have highlighted some of those things early on. But I see that as one of the most difficult parts of doing this. It's not, employees will often go with the flow, manage their lives, really make it work, appreciate it. I think executive, will often see the benefits, understand that healthier, happier employees, there's going to be less turnover. It's those supervisory positions. It's actually very, very challenging because they have to change nearly everything they do.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I actually spoke at this topic of the 4-day work week at the Future of Work conference a couple of weeks ago, because as I mentioned before we started recording, I actually did a 4-day work week starting back in 2005 when I was leading a department of hundreds of people across multiple cities and countries. And it was unheard of then to do that sort of thing. And one of the things that I shared as a key takeaway when speaking at the conference was, if you are thinking of implementing something like this, it is so important to not just come up with the policy and put it in, but to think about, as you're talking about, what's the capability uplift that I need to do at a leadership level as well as an individual contributor level to be able to do it. Because one of the things that I believe is just saying you're going from 5 days to 4 days and not putting in the tools and the systems and that capability uplift for quite a large percentage of people is actually a lot more stressful, because they're just trying to cram in hours and just do really longer days on the 4 days. What comes to mind for you when you think about that? Of, don't just put in the policy, you've got to think about the systems, the capability uplift, the process. What are the key areas that you have been working through, whether it's with this Medibank one or more broadly with the work that you've been doing to ensure that it's successful and sustainable?
Yeah, it's such an interesting point, actually. I mean, I think the capabilities point is really useful, because it's not just about, oh, the structure is this, we're not going to have these meetings anymore, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. It's a language,
Yeah.
it's a way of communicating, it's a way of letting go and saying, okay, well, you're not going to be, I don't have this control that I might have had, say, 10 years ago. It's this massive, I think this is one of the things that's happened over the last maybe 10, 15 years, is this movement away from rule-based authoritarian leadership, this realization that actually that's not the way that humans work best. We're not suited to this. And I know that there are lots of places where that doesn't stand. I'm sure if you're doing surgery on somebody's brain, it's extremely important to have somebody who says, I'm making this call and you're doing what I'm telling you to do. But in most workplaces, this rule-based authoritarian leadership is not the leadership that gets the best. And I think that that capability, the capability to move away from, especially if you've been in managerial or supervisory positions for a long time, the capacity to move away from that authoritarian rule-based approach to these different types of newer leadership is very important. But the other thing I will say is we just don't know much yet. So we intuitively think that working 4 days a week versus working 5, that sounds great. It'll free up people. It'll give you a better work-life balance, etc. So we kind of intuitively think this, but the research is a little bit further behind, and we don't actually know the cognitive, the psychological mechanisms that make this work. So I'll give you an example. It's not intuitive that working a 4-day week will make you more creative. And yet there's some evidence that it happens. Why would that happen? So we're looking at, okay, does detachment, psychological detachment, having a period maybe where you're even bored, although everybody's life's so frantic, I can't imagine being bored, but you're totally away from work. Then you come back to work with fresh eyes. Are you more creative? So it's sort of taking what you've said. We do need to develop new capabilities as leaders, as managers, in order for these new ways of working to happen. But we also need the research so we know what to do, because at the moment, we don't actually know what part of the 4-day week, what element is making a difference. And that's important because people might want their work team to be more relaxed and less stressed. They might want them to be more committed. They might want them to be more creative. They might want them to be more intrinsically motivated and adventurous. I don't know. There are lots of different things. I imagine as we get a better understanding, there will be different ways of fine-tuning that flexible work, that 4-day week, that will enable different outcomes in a stronger way.
Yeah. Oh, that's fabulous. As you're talking, I was thinking my working hypothesis is the same, that I know that my best ideas come when I'm not at my desk. They come when I'm out for a run, or they come when every 5 years, my family, we take a 3-month sabbatical. My best ideas by far have come when I have been nowhere near a screen and I've just relaxed and had time. And obviously not everyone has that to be able to take a 3-month sabbatical to come up with ideas. But that thing of moving from busyness to creating space, I would think would have a big role. So what are the metrics that, or the measurements that in general you are looking at the moment and testing out?
It's very broad. It's quite in depth.
Is it turnover, engagement, those sorts of things? Or
well, we're having a look at those, yes, because so one part of it is we need to make sure that this is good for Medibank. And I'm talking about Medibank, the organisation. So we need to really focus on performance, productivity, innovation. And we are doing that. But we're also looking at, other behavioural changes. So are you less likely to go home from work and snack, binge, eat too much, eat unhealthy food? Is that an effect of the 4-day work week? We're looking at psychological mechanisms like the detachment that we talked about. So we're looking at a lot of different mechanisms, expected effects, but going into the detail so we know what's happening here and we can replicate it, strengthen it. If we find that some aspect is actually increasing commitment and reducing turnover, then we can beef that up, especially in areas of, every organization has areas where it's a difficult place to work. You've got a lot of customer interface and the customers are challenging. For example, if we can say, okay, we know something that will help us retain those valued employees because we know that setting our work up this way enhances commitment, enhances well-being. So we are doing some good in-depth stuff. I like it.
Oh, I'm so excited on this topic. And I'd love your views then. If you think forward to the next decade and beyond, what are the things that you're thinking about or your views when you think about the future of work and how people work together?
I was thinking about this in preparation for the show. So back in the day, a long time ago, people actually joined organizations and became that employee, an employee of that organization. And they were treated almost like, well, not like family, but there was give and take on both sides because you were expecting a long-term career with that organization. So you knew that when push came to shove and you needed to do something and work harder, you did that because there'd be quiet times and you might be able to work fewer hours at that point. So there was a lot of give and take. And I use this term like a marriage, that where you have good and bad, but it's a long-term prospect. And, you put in a lot of effort because you think to yourself, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to create a reputation. Now we've moved away from that. So I speak about it like it's fantastic, but I'm not saying that it is, the way we should be working at all. Now we don't work like that. Now people work to develop capabilities and take those capabilities to new employers. They work in very different manners. They work as consultants. They, have so many different careers. I was talking to somebody the other day. He came to fumigate the house. He trained as an electrical engineer and then retrained as a financial planner, and now is a fumigator.
Wow.
So but this is typical, isn't it? This
can.
way in which we work is very different. And herein lies the problem, that we are now driven by our own ambition. I'm going to work here and get a promotion. I'm going to build these capabilities and take them to my next employer. I'm going to make myself a product that's really attractive. And that can work. It certainly can, but I don't think it's the ideal. And what I'm hoping for, this is, my vision, like if I was going to say in response to your question, what might it look like in the future? What might work look like? I think we'll have a balance of ambition that is focused on the individual. So I want to develop my own skills, my capabilities. I want to get promoted. I want to work in this kind of team. But we will also have a work environment that connects us to the organization more. We will have a sense that the organization cares about us as humans, not individually, but sees us as humans and wants to create an environment where we thrive. So we will have our own personal ambition, and we will have ambition for that organization, our team, our unit, maybe the organization more broadly. We will want to stay there, and we will want to see that organization or our team thrive and be successful. And I think if we have both of those things working together, we will have a really engaging, committed, flexible, advancing workforce. So that's
amazing.
That would be great, but I'm not sure it will happen.
Well, it comes back to the point you made earlier also of shifting away from the controlling rules-based authoritarian leadership style to a more connected, authentic, humanistic one. And it's interesting on that. I wrote a book called Effective Remote Teams, and I have a chapter which is called Unlearning. Because one of the things that I really think is needed, particularly for people who are already in leadership positions, so they're not, they might still be rising up but they've already made it to a certain level. The way that most of us were schooled and were recognized was that more rules-based authoritarian leadership style. So it is an interesting thing of adapting and unlearning that what made a lot of people successful to get to these senior leadership roles today and not what's going to help them to be able to be successful going forward.
I so agree with that. And that's what I was trying to talk about with the supervisory role, where they have to unlearn everything they've learnt, because actually being a supervisor in this environment means a whole different focus, building a different climate, having a different relationship with people. You're responsible for something, obviously, supervisors always are, but the way in which you deliver and the way in which you encourage and enable your employees is completely different. I really agree with that. And I think it's such a good thing for employees to think about how people are going to be their best. And, you get such a different answer. You can't ever answer that with, well, they're going to be their best if I get angry with them and have a lot of rules. Like that, no one ever says that. Or if I'm really, really strict and I make sure they're here exactly when I want them to be here. None of that is ever going to be the answer to how am I ever going to, how am I going to do this?
Completely. And are there any other leadership skills that you think that leaders should be thinking about to amplify, whether it's if their company is moving to a 4-day work week, or even just in general, if you think about where we're heading of we're not all in the office together all the time? Are there other ones that you would say people should be mindful of?
Yes, we actually do some work in this area of inclusive leadership, and we do it a lot with hospitals and healthcare organizations. And inclusive leadership is, it's a kind of, simply put, it's the combination of fostering belongingness, so people feel like they really belong and are important, and also valuing uniqueness, so that to be part of a team, you're belonging in that team, but you don't have to agree. You don't have to do what's necessarily expected or predicted. Your own unique value becomes much more important. And the inclusive leader brings about a focus on people's uniqueness. And I think that
Beautiful.
it really makes a difference. So it's linked, you would imagine it's linked to innovation, and it is, but it's linked to a lot of different positive effects, especially when you're looking at multidisciplinary teams. So, you might have, say in healthcare, you might have the old adage would be, say, doctors and nurses in a team, and perhaps the old struggles about power and status might get into the discussion. And indeed, they have different professional backgrounds. The inclusive leader, so typically leaders come in and think, well, I don't want that conflict. I need everybody to get along. I'll try and placate, smooth, those kinds of things. Inclusive leaders speak out about the differences, but say that without those differences, you're actually not going to get anywhere near the outcome that you might get because of all those different. It's not just about expertise, it's about knowledge and beliefs. It's about, say, one person has a very specific view on a disease and just that disease. How can we best treat that? And then another person has a holistic view about the human, and how can that person be strengthened so that they can get through this treatment? Bringing them together makes it so much better than it ever could be if just one of those dominated.
I love that so much. Well, before we get on to some rapid fire questions, are there any other points that you think would be really useful for leaders to know, whether it's about 4-day work week or your other research that you do in the areas of health, wellbeing and leadership?
Well, yeah, but we don't have 20 years to chat. So I will say one thing though,
Yeah.
we're doing some really interesting stuff. It's called health-oriented leadership, but it is a principle which is how leaders are is often how employees are. So if a leader is inclusive and looks after their own health and well-being and is really clever at being effective and efficient and not wasting time, their employees learn from that, almost the way that parents, children learn from parents.
Yes.
So no matter what you do as a leader, it is nowhere near as impactful as what you do.
Completely. Oh my gosh, we're speaking the same language. One of the phrases I love is your leadership shadow is long. And that being that it's about what people see that you do. I love that phrase, health-oriented leadership. And it's the reason I focus at the leadership level in general, because I know that that has the biggest impact on people and a culture, because we use the term role modeling and people look for, okay, how are you role modeling behaviors? And the people that are looked at usually are the direct leader. So yeah, that's very aligned with everything I've seen and felt in corporate over the last, couple of decades now.
It's interesting, isn't it? And I find that sometimes we work with leaders and they'll have done everything really well, sort of on paper, if you like. So they'll have fantastic visions and really have employed some great people. They'll do all their, town halls, consultation, whatever it is, looks great. But it's those microseconds where they, they might show a different side to themselves, where they might lose their cool about something. And just that, it's such a small thing, and people pick up on it and they
Yeah.
think, oh, it's okay to lose my cool about things.
Yeah.
It suddenly becomes the way in which people talk, the way people act. So I think it's very important, much more important. I mean, we're all human, so we all, leaders or not, we're all going to do things that aren't the way we want to be 100% of the time. But I really think it's worth, like making sure that what you do as a leader is what you want others to do.
Yeah, I love that so much. Well, Rebecca, this has been amazing. I would love to finish off with some rapid fire questions. Are you up for it?
I am up for it. Not, I'm a bit of a slow thinker, so I hope I'll be
That's
able to
okay.
answer okay.
Absolutely. Well, the first one is, what is the best thing you've bought for under roughly $100?
Okay, well, that's an easy one because I recently bought membership to the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and it
Oh,
is just so fantastic. It
what a
is,
wonderful one. Yeah,
it's
beautiful.
it's so brilliant, that the Sydney Modern, the new building. I mean, it's just mind blowing. And talk about change the way you think. You want to detach from work. That is something to do.
I love that. And what about, Rebecca, the book that you've either gifted or recommended the most to others?
It's an oldie,
Yep.
Angela's Ashes. Do you remember it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I just think I love it, and I gave it to so many people, and it's just a mind-blowing book. It's really beautifully written. I mean,
Yes.
Frank McCourt, he's wonderful, but it was amazing to think that people live like that so,
Yeah.
not very long ago.
Oh, beautiful. And what's the most fearless thing you've ever done?
Okay, so fearless, stupid, I'm not sure. I recently didn't take a promotion. Well, not recently, but over the last while, I didn't take a promotion so that I could live the life I wanted to live. And for me, that was difficult. That took a
Yeah.
lot of guts. Still not sure whether it's fearless or silly, but anyway, I'm going to put it in the in that category.
Yeah, I love that. And I have a lot of people who ask me for career advice, particularly if they're offered a promotion. And so we talk about also, it's okay to say no if it's not the right thing. You don't have to say yes,
Mm.
really consciously think through it. So yes, but it is very brave to do. And finally, Rebecca, what does outcomes over hours mean to you?
Right. I think the best way to look at it is to look at it as a journey from the old authoritarian way of leading to a partnership between leaders and employees where they, sorry, well, that's what I think
Yeah.
anyway. That's,
I love that. What a beautiful definition and what a beautiful way for us to wrap up. So, Rebecca Mitchell, thank you so much for being a guest on the Outcomes Over Our show today.
thank you so much, Tina. It was great.